brief struggle this morning, I decided to come to church. It wasn't any struggle at all. I was looking forward to being at church all week. I don't know how much I would get said this morning, but one philosophy that I've had for a long time is, there are some speakers, especially preachers, that just think they have to get it all out at once because they may not get a chance. And we may never be gathered in exactly the same way ever again, so they think that they've just got to get everything. But my philosophy is give as much as you can, mind the Lord, and say what the Lord has on your heart, and then pray that we'll all be back together again, and we'll learn something else and have time to worship the Lord again. Well, I really am glad that I came to church this morning. This is a good church service. It's good to be with God's people, and it's good to know and sense God's presence. And to start with, I'd like to tell you that there are three places that the Israelites in the Old Testament found themselves after they had occupied the land that God had prepared for them, that Abraham was promised and Moses led the people to, that is Israel. But there were three places that God allowed the Israelites to be taken to, other than Israel, that represent things, represent spiritual places. The first was Egypt. They were allowed to become slaves in Egypt. Egypt in the Bible is a type of sin. It really happened. They really did go to Egypt, and they really were slaves for some 400 years. And that's what Egypt represents as far as the biblical narrative is concerned. Another place was Babylon. In the, 500, 600 years before Christ, Israel was wayward, and she was not listening or obeying God. And so God allowed the country of Babylon, the empire of Babylon, to come and take captive the people of Israel. And they went to Babylon as a type, and that's always portrayed in the Bible as a type of backsliding. They were where they should be, and then they drifted, and they slid, and God allowed them to be taken to captive into Babylon. The third country that they found themselves in, or at least some of them found themselves in, was the country of Moab. Now, this is in Jeremiah. It talks about the Moabites, and these people were not very nice people, and God didn't send the Israelites there, but in our story that I have in my mind and heart today, it's about the story of Ruth and her sister and her mom and her dad. And it's found in the book of Ruth. But I want to read a scripture out of Jeremiah chapter 48, verse 11, that talks about what Moab's problem as a country was. Moab hath been at ease from his youth. Some people use the other gender and say her youth. And she or he hath settled on her lees, and hath not been emptied from vessel to vessel. Neither hath she or he gone into captivity. Therefore her taste remained in her, and her scent is not changed. Scent, S-C-E-N-T. Well, I am kind of proud of my research and knowledge this morning. I want to share it with you. I'm going to use this word again. I share this with some trepidation because you might get the wrong impression. I'm going to tell you how wine is made. Now, I have never seen wine being manufactured. Just out of interest, my wife's brother has a wine ranch out in California, a big wine ranch, and makes wine. But never been there, and I've never tasted his wine. But they say, now I've done the research, they say that wine is fermented or, made in kegs. And it's something like, and this is my own impression from my research and reading, it's something like vinegar, where it ferments, and if it's left standing for a long time, it gets that little yucky stuff in it. And that yucky stuff is called dregs. Interesting. So what they do, and again, I'm just talking from research now, not from experience. What they do is they pour wine periodically from one container, I think it's called a keg, to another container, and they strain it and filter out these dregs so that if it's left in the original container, it becomes bitter and sticky. It smells. Now, I kind of pieced all this together, and I've seen pictures, or films where the people pour wine into a glass and they swish it around and they smell it. I don't know that I've been that close to it. But they seem to think there's something there. They seem to think that they can get past the whatever bitterness there is. I think it is bitter. But anyhow, they change kegs, and then and if they don't, it becomes bitter tasting, more bitter than it is naturally, I guess, and it smells bad. That's what they're talking about here. The Bible tells us about winemaking and about the fact that Moab just was resting on its leaves, which means it was just there in the keg, and it was getting very smelly, and it wasn't doing anything for God, and there was no power there. Well, that's the country that a family went to, the family of Ruth, but Elimelech and Naomi was the mother and father, or father and mother, I should say. And the story, very briefly, is mostly about Ruth. They went to the land of Moab because there was a famine in the land of Israel, and God had promised Israel that He would take care of her, that He'd supply the need. And Elimelech thought, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but the story bears this out, that he could do better for his family by going to another country. But the country was Moab, and God had forbidden relationships with Moab and Israel, or vice versa. But nevertheless, Elimelech went and took his wife Naomi, and they had two sons. Their name was Chilion and Mahlon. And while they were there in that country, escaping the famine and getting something to eat, Elimelech died, left Naomi a widow. And Mahlon and Chilion got married. They married Orpah and Ruth, respectively. And then the two boys, the two sons, died. Naomi was left with two daughters-in-law. And Orpah, and you have to read the book of Ruth because I'm going through it quickly. Orpah decided that she would go back to Israel with Naomi, her mother-in-law, but Naomi turned around to her and said, "No, you probably don't want to go back because I don't have any more sons. There's no hope for you in Israel, and you're just going to be alone and the rest of your life, and probably there'll be another famine, and so on and so forth." And so Orpah turned around, went back to Moab, and didn't follow Naomi over to Israel. However, Ruth made a different decision. She decided to go with Naomi back to Israel. And this is what she said, and it's in Ruth chapter 1, verse 16 and on. And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God." It's a family situation. It's an attachment situation.